afternoon about our respective Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, 9, 10, you name it, plus. Because I was an idiot and misinterpreted the amount of time I had to speak, we're going to go a little out of order with my slides, so bear with me. Here's us and our respective families. So the brief agenda for this afternoon, we're going to start off with a bit of a comparison. For context, both McGill and Waterloo have very similar footprints, between 1,000 and 1,100 total websites. D7 previous? Yeah. Of course. On-prem hosting, multi-site, pretty standard enterprise universities at that point. Then I'll go through a little bit of my context. Matt's going to share some of his, and then we'll try to leave some room, if at all possible, for questions. So starting with what we did differently, we took different approaches to Layout Builder, and I think that is one where I'll steal a line from Michael at the previous presentation. If you want my hot takes on that stuff, come see me after a couple beers. I'll certainly give you that. Hosting was a big one too. As I'll get into a tiny bit, we decided to bundle a Pantheon move from on-prem with our migration, which, again, hot takes, see me after. Not that it was the right thing to do, but it's all about timing with a lot of this stuff. And I think the theme from my perspective is largely about timing. And then manual post-migration updates to content. I think at Waterloo, Matt can speak more on behalf of McGill, of course, but at Waterloo, we have an extremely decentralized operation. Our distribution is centrally developed and managed by my team, but everything to do with content responsibilities, governance, all that stuff is extremely distributed, and that provides its own set of challenges, of course. Similarities between our two contexts, we both coincidentally decided to implement a pattern lab or pattern library at the same time that we chose to do our migration projects. McGill is using Storybook, we're using Pattern Lab, but we are moving to Storybook, but fundamentally the same. And both of us collectively expected this thing to be a whole lot easier than it turned out to be, for sure. By raise of hands quickly, how many of you in the room have completed your migrations? Oh, no? About 10-ish%. How many have not started yet and are petrified at the thought? Okay. Okay, just to get an idea of what the audience is here. So now I'm going to fast forward through a bunch of stuff here. I'm gonna lead with this. Because this is the question I get asked the most often here. If I could do it all over again, what would I change? I would change a lot. But we've actively been doing this work, the migration work, since 2019, materially. Although, if you ask my lead developer, he always says the first line of DA code that the team committed to our internal Git was in 2016. So it's been a long time, regardless of how you measure that. A big thing for me is we didn't know what we didn't know at the time, so we actually worked with the wonderful folks at Evolving Web way back in 2018, 2019. Because largely for my team, D8, from a technical perspective, was a bit of a black box. The paradigm shift to object-oriented programming and all that stuff posed a lot of challenges for my team, and it was almost like analysis by paralysis. Where do we even start with all this stuff? So if I had a time machine, I would spend whatever time I could to really try to understand what the word migration meant. And as it's turned out, from my perspective, migration is only one piece, a very important piece, but one piece of a ton of additional layers of building. Again, Michael in the previous presentation said Drupal is great at being a web builder to build a web builder. That's what we do. We build a SaaS web publishing project for a captive audience of approximately 1,500 to 2,000 total users. So they're bringing their experiences to work in 2024 and expect that the Wix or the Weebly or the Webflow thing that I use at home to build my fundraising website, I want that experience at work. And so that's a lot of it for me. Again, kind of hot takey, so talk after. But if I could do it over again, I wouldn't migrate. I would, I actually thought of a slide this morning. I didn't have enough time to put it together, clearly. But it would be basically a graph that plotted volume of sites on the x-axis starting from 1 to 1,000 plus, and then degree of success from impossible to high, and then I'd have a line that depicted inversely, I think I'm trying this correctly, amount of stuff that you should include along with your migration work, and it would be a linear downward slope this way. Migration, if we could have, and I know it's very complicated, if we could have treated that as a sacred activity and just get the act of migrating sites over from D7 to D8 at the time, and I understand, again, like I said, it's way more complicated than that, but if somehow we could have kept that activity sacred, it would have done us a lot of good. It would have unlocked the ability for my team to not have to worry about, well, every time we ship a new feature, have we tested that against the migration scripts? Do we have to build additional migration scripts? Just a lot of dependencies that otherwise would have been unlocked if we could have somehow miraculously done just migration. That's not the reality for us, for Matt, for a lot of more complex distributions. And so if you do have to go through migration, treat that activity as sacred as you can. If you can't just outright say, no, we're not going to migrate anybody's sites, please come to me and you're going to build your site from scratch, which is not a somewhat of a rare approach, obviously. I would have had completely separate build and run teams. That's another challenge that we had, is I'm asking the same people to do all of the same work, to maintain the current D7 product up until January of 2019. That's when I said, no, that's it, we're done. We're not supporting our D7 product actively anymore. That was the only reason why we were able to gain momentum, was when I said no more active D7 development. That still didn't, that wasn't a miracle by any stretch of the imagination. There was still so much additional work on top of developing the new D8 product, on top of still providing all of the support that we did. So having separate build and run teams would have been nice if possible, and I would have preferred to use an MVP approach to build a product off to the side, a D8 product off to the side that we could have incremented on over time, that we could have onboarded, and I think Matt's going to get into this in his slides. So an approach that would have effectively got us a working D8, D9, D10 product off to the side, still maintain our D7, but unlocked a lot of the time pressures that a lot of our stakeholders were feeling, because we were bringing those time pressures to the table. We thought we were going to be done this in November 2021, and obviously that's wrong. So I'm going to pass things over to Matt.
All right. Yeah, here's another presentation by Joe's team with even more about all this. I'll try to go through this quickly. Yeah, so we both have, it's kind of like a in-house Squarespace thing. You've got templates. We also have about 1,000 sites and about, I think 50, not counting people who retired, something like 1,500 people who are currently trained. So of all the faculty and staff at McGill, 1 out of 8 that you see like walking down the sidewalk have been trained and can edit at least one of our sites. That's a lot of users. It's all one big code base, except that currently the homepage has a separate theme. Unlike Harvard, we didn't just throw it off onto a WordPress site. Our platform is opt-in. People can go build their own thing if they want, but then they've got to pay for it. They've got to deal with brand guidelines, accessibility, legal requirements around accessibility, security, a lot of things. We sit down, we explain that to people, and like 19 out of 20 say, actually, know what, you would do that for us. We'll work within your system. Hard things in our site are that we have the folks at Evolving Web built a course calendar front end into our Drupal 6 site and then rebuilt it in Drupal 7. That works great, but it's a massive pile of code which we are maintaining. Because it's complex, it has to be massive. Now the course calendar is going off to a separate vendor who only does course calendars, and that will no longer be our team's problem. We also have like a sort of a news syndication thing between these 1,000 sites so that all the medicine sites can have the bulletin from the dean of whatever. It's kind of like a little internal RSS thing. That's been ported. Drupal 7 is our third CMS, and so it's been ported forward through those and has to be backwards compatible and pulling things from the old thing, blah, blah, blah. So we want to simplify that and just piggyback our search engine. Those two things together are a quarter of our code base and therefore of our maintenance burden. We're a team of about 10. Support this. In our team of 10, we have 2 people who do who just talk to users. They're like there's a general IT help desk, and then if they can't answer the question, it comes to those 2 people in our team. There are also other people who do training. We have a newsletter. We have like sort of internal conferences. We do one-on-one consultation with these people. We built a special thing, and all those people have to know how to use it. And Joe is nodding because I'm guessing he's doing very similar things. I'm not going to read all these slides. By the way, you'll be able to get these slides after, which is why we're going so fast. But yeah, Drupal 6 was like 2009, so that got migrated. We started, our first commit was in 2020 in our case. In mid-2021, Drupal 7 moved to essential bug security fixes and maintenance-related, migration-related fixes only, and we've been working on Drupal, well, at the time 9 since then. Of about 1,000 websites, Joe didn't mention that he's
We're at about 75% of the way through our 1,100 websites, roughly.
And we're at about 1%. So, yeah, we're, every time somebody tells me when we're going to be done, I say, well, our security support ends January 25. If everything goes perfectly, we'll be done by then. And which is another way of saying it's not going to be done by then. Our CIO said, "Why is your project 2 years late? Are you terrible? Are you bad at are you bad at delivering? Or are you bad at estimating?"
Can I talk to him? I'm happy to share my thoughts with him.
Yeah, yeah. So about our team. Yeah.
Map all these things on the same timeline. They're probably all very similar.
Yeah. So I said, "Oh, yeah, good question." It was estimating. Who has seen this graph? Yeah, so you know the thing where you can see how much any given Drupal module is used? There's no link to this, but you can go find the same thing for Drupal core. This, of course, this big section in the middle is Drupal 7. That's basically a straight line, and so by end of security support, it's going to be something like 20-25% of its peak are still running Drupal 7 the day that Benji stops fixing your bugs for you. And you're on your own for security issues. Thank you, Benji. Drupal 6 was basically exactly the same. From its peak, although this data doesn't go back to the Drupal 6 peak, Drupal 6 security end of life was here, and a whole lot of people were still using it. Yeah, this is the other reason I gave our CIO. Lines of code in Drupal 6, manageable like 50,000. You can get that in your head without too much difficulty. Drupal 7 was like a little under 200,000 lines of code, and then, oh my God, look at like Drupal 8, 9, 10. Like, this graph should have been logarithmic. Like, of course, it took us forever to learn how to use this. It was a huge ask of our dev team. We also hired Evolving Web to do some training for us. But yeah, it's a lot. In the new version, so we keep telling people, we've got the security, so maybe there's an advantage of starting the project late. We keep telling our stakeholders, look, we've got this security deadline. We're not giving you any new features now. We're just like feature compatibility unless it comes for free in Drupal 10, basically.
I think the extensions kind of, while they were appreciated at the time, came back to bite us in the butt a little bit. So.
Yeah, and we just, by the time we were telling people about this, by the time people knew we were working on this, then there was that hard deadline. So that's been very handy to hold over people's head. So yeah, we stripped those 2 big custom pieces that I talked about earlier. The design system was shoved out to a separate design system. I will fully admit, I didn't understand how helpful that would be when our lead front-end dev said, hey, I've got this idea. And then like the Slate started using it, the eCal people are going to use it, the course calendar people are going to use it, and lots of other people I don't even have to talk to are using it. So boy, was that a win. I'm going to mention your name another time. Benji just mentioned that at Harvard, their WordPress sites and their Drupal sites are going to be sharing design libraries. Like, yeah, so do that. The only new user visible feature is Layout Builder, except it's opt-in, and your existing like slightly clunky thing that we had to build with shoving templates into the CK editor in Drupal 7 will come forward as is with backwards compatible CSS, so that we don't need to teach you Layout Builder in order to do basic edits on your Drupal 10 site. And yeah, and is that what you did, Joe?
No, for other reasons,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Basically.
We had an opportunity to Joe mentioned the challenge that you folks had is that you were relatively early to work on a major migration like this on a big level.
Yeah, as far as I understood, because I had an opportunity to travel a little bit right before COVID shut everything down, so I met with some colleagues at other universities. The University of Calgary was actually way early on D8. They had shipped their first D8 site the summer of 2019, and they basically strong-armed the campus into using D8, using Layout Builder at the time was the lens through which they were talking about providing everybody with this more flexible authoring experience. That was the main piece of feedback, and was our main piece of feedback actually back in those days too. So
yeah, because again, like in any time you've got 1,500 users, some of them want the power tool, and other ones like would find Notebook hard to use, right? Notepad hard to use, right? Like you've got this huge range. So people who want to do something fancy, here's Layout Builder, and if you don't want to learn what that is, then you don't even need to know about it. You just won't read those sections of the internal knowledge base. Oh yeah, and we had this weird thing where external vendors, such as an agency I used to work for, could write custom modules that would sit on top of our big code base and provide custom functionality for a couple sites. If that sounds crazy, I see that look. Yeah, in retrospect, oh my God, what a nightmare. That's like for everybody, for us, our central team, and for the external vendor, like they had no real dev environment, so that is going away. We also spent a ton of time. We decided to keep hosting on-premise, but that was, we spent a lot of work because we needed we needed high availability, so we moved to MySQL and Redis to a cluster. And we added Varnish because there was no Varnish cache in there. Yes, that made no sense. We're fixing it now. And we had this huge collection of random scripts that were like doing CI, CD, so that all those worked, but we centralized them into a GitLab pipeline that is in our main Drupal repository. When you look at the slides at home, all the things with red boxes are the parts that we added, such as Varnish. And our GitLab pipeline looks like this. Look, tests that don't have composer dependencies. Tests.
They're all green too. That's awesome.
Yeah. This is I had to cherry pick. These are the PHP static analysis tests so the things that do require composer dependencies that we build the prod version of the artifacts deployed to pre-staging, and then this keeps going. Then you run updates, visual regression tests run. You create a ticket in ServiceNow ITSM. So those, because if it's manual, I'm going to forget. And you deploy it to live, and then after that, the code coverage thing gets built, and you can click one button to go and close the ticket. That was a lot of work, which was well spent. And our general plan was to minimum viable product, so we will prioritize sites by sites that are low visibility and which use a small number of features. So we can launch like the 2013 annual report that nobody ever looks at, and then iterate up from there, add features and fix bugs until we can support increasingly complex and increasingly high visibility sites. We decided not to migrate the web forms because boy is that different.
Thank God.
Yeah, again, learning from people who had to hack that trail in the brush before us. And yeah, and if everything goes perfectly, we're done this year.
What stage are you in now?
Pardon?
What stage are you in now?
Of 1,000 sites, we've migrated 10. Yeah, so it's yeah, we're just starting to be at the next stage will be asking people who aren't in the central web team to do user acceptance testing. So we'll ask the power users to test a version of one of their simpler sites and give us feedback. So we have yet to get feedback from those 1,500 people. So I don't know, they might find a bug. I guess it's happened. And we didn't go and hire an army of co-op students. Yeah, we're making everyone update their content after because there's always manual fixes. Yeah, other talks by our team. I think I used more of the time than you did.
No, that's all right. Any questions? It did occur to me, I think Matt ended on change management side. I think, again, just to tie a bow on things, change management was crucially important for us this entire time. Our change management approach has morphed dramatically over time as well. We started with one approach and have changed it multiple times to suit the realities of what we were trying to accomplish. Benji asked the question for the session about user, or made a comment about user engagement. That's another huge challenge for us, is what happens when you email and or include a site manager in a JSM ticket and try to connect with them 50 million times and they just refuse. So that's been a challenge. And then the thing I'll mention, I think we're over time, so I apologize. But the last thing I'll mention is for all of the wonderful things that come with Drupal and the open source community, the byproduct of that is also a million dependencies that you have to work through. And one of my slides, let's see if we can fast rewind this. One of my slides is a bit of an illustration. So this is our CK editor. Stock is on top. Our D7 version is on the bottom. And when you say migration, again, not to oversimplify, well, it's kind of oversimplifying things. When people talk about migration, I think one thing that gets lost is it's a multiple layer cake. And one of the layers that often gets forgotten is about stuff like CK editor plugins that, similarly to contrib modules that don't have upgrade paths, CK editor plugins can also very much not have upgrade paths. Let alone, we're not on CK editor 5. I think Matt's team is on CK editor 5, but
our 10 sites, yeah.
That's a whole other ballgame. So migration for us has been a combination of a million different initiatives that we're all trying to wrap in this word migration, but you just have to be very, very careful with that when you're talking to stakeholders at this volume. So, yeah. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Are we using web forms? Yeah, we institutionally it was decided that Microsoft Forms is better. Don't get me onto that. Microsoft Forms, however, is very, very simple compared to the million things you can do with Drupal web forms, and there's no other alternatives. So we will provide web forms, but we're going to make you recreate them manually. In part to disincentivize you to keep using them, and in part so that we don't have to migrate them. That's the one thing. That's the one big thing that has to be recreated manually.
Yes.
Are there any automations out there that can help you in this process?
Our migration scripts, so the act of migrating itself, yes, we use the Drupal migrate module. I think everybody uses the migrate module. So the act of migrating is, in and of itself, mature, reliable. The processes and everything are it's there. If you want to migrate one site to one site, you're good. But in our case, we're trying to maintain one theme, one artifact in Josh's lovely Pantheon environment. We're trying to centralize everything in the old, I guess, as the old multi-site model would have in D7, and then distribute that amongst 1,000 websites, and that's more complicated. We've had to bolt on a lot of stuff on top of the migrate module to take into account all of the various ways our users have tried to use our product over the years and try to get that data over into D8, D9.
We're not using, the question was, how did you migrate commerce? We are not handling anything transactional, no commerce. Thank God that's someone else's job. You?
Similar with us, like we use Shopify as our bulk retail e-commerce solution. So, and I'm trying to think, I don't think there's another use case similar to commerce that we use. Yeah.
Is the Drupal 7 architecture is so old? Was this an opportunity to recreate things?
Yeah. So I assume you're referring to D7 architecture being old versus. So like information architecture or
Like
or just generally things. Just generally.
Like content types? Like what fields are there?
Yeah. So I will say that we have strongly encouraged all of our individual site leads of the different business units to go through that exercise. So we have a whole thing, we have a whole process from like pre-flight onboarding. A lot of it talks about, yes, we would strongly encourage you to take this opportunity to do things. If this is your window of opportunity to completely rethink things, do it now. Have people taking that opportunity, that's where we come into a lot of friction, for sure. It's not always the case.
Right. I think we're over time. Oh, yeah. Ask us
Thanks,
after.
everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.